then the Bain rep says, the Barnes & Noble rep would say, okay, that sounds great, Bain. We'll take all of these, maybe not these, and we'll put them in all of our stores. Well, now, unfortunately, it looks as though you have to contact each store independently, which is just kind of nutty.
It was all or nothing now.
I mean, it's basically like they're operating like a bunch of indies, which has the benefit of if you have people who are invested in their section, in their category, and they understand, then that's great, because then they might I know there's like the Barnes & Noble in San Diego loves my book. That's great. Like, whereas I don't know that Barnes & Noble this way, but I don't know about that, right? I don't know about any of those. And I also don't know that it would have necessarily gotten the same level of attention up here, which may have determined that San Diego was never going to have enough push for my book because someone told them not to. So it's like kind of like a plus and a minus, but
and how do you reach them? Do you
wildly frustrating.
Right. Do you cold call them all? I mean, it's just...
Gotta visit them one by one.
Yeah, exactly. Ambulance, get in my RV and bake cookies for them all.
I do think this kind of touches on something that I want to make sure to say early, is that there are a lot of things you can do to help a book release, and all of them will move the needle a little bit, but fundamentally, if there's something like, I hate cold calling people, I would rather die, so I won't do that. Now that might help if I went and went into all the bookstores around me and introduced myself to all the fantasy buyers and pitched them on my book. That would probably help some, but also I might annoy them. I don't know, right? But so this is not where my strength is, and I'm not going to do this part. Other people might not like going to cons. Some people really hate sitting up here, and they would rather die than do this. I love doing this. I'm like, yes, put me in front of people and let me talk about writing, and then maybe they'll think I'm charming and think my book might be charming. That moves the needle a little bit, but there's so many things you can do, and you do not have to do all of them, and especially you do not have to do the ones that you don't do well, right? Deciding like, I need to make a bunch of promo material, but I don't know anything about graphic design or art, but there we go, here's some ugly bookmarks. You just wasted a bunch of money, and it probably didn't move the needle that much.
And it could in fact be actively harmful. I mean, if you go out and are trying to do things that you're uncomfortable doing, you come across as inauthentic, and that's just not something that audiences there and readers are looking for. I was going to say that, up to this point, up until the last few years, you had review sites, you had like Library Journal, you had the trades, but since then, something that has really kind of come out of nowhere and has really taken over is Book Talk and BookTube. Mm-hmm. Like reviewers on TikTok and on YouTube, there are lots of them, and they have lots and lots of followers. And they can, like, if you can get one of them convinced, or a few of them convinced to review your book on video, which is kind of counterintuitive, but that video streaming, it's making a big difference.
Yeah, I guess it speaks to this ever-changing environment, and every year it seems like maybe there's some new technology or media you have to or master.
Well, I will say that I feel like I'm very glad that they seem to have realized that what moves books is people who like them and are passionate about them talking about them on TikTok, not authors going on TikTok. Because again, I would rather die. This is not something I want to do, and I would be actively harmful trying to make clever little skits for TikTok. But people for whom like this is a great medium for them to talk about the books that they love, it's perfect. And once you trust somebody, you want to go to them for their advice. This all works very well within that new technology. I'm very glad that I was
Of course, an author is going to tell you, read my book, it's great.
But it's kind of like the difference between going down in the dealer room when you've got the individual booths with one author and all their books versus a bookstore. Like. That it feels kind of high pressure most of the time, and it can turn people off. Some people do it really well. Some people are incredible hand sellers and are just very charismatic. Others, not so much.
Yeah. What I was going to say is that the people that you trust are the people who are not directly related to that book. People who have similar interests to you, people who make content that you enjoy. Like if you can make friends with an influencer, do that. If you can go on a podcast, or yes, if you can make friends with Erin, do that. You can. She's very friendly. Go on podcasts.
But I won't do TikToks for you.
There you go. Write guest articles on someone else's site. You know, leave comments on YouTube videos, and forge relationships in whatever sorts of online media you can. And what I was going to say, totally different from everything that I've just said right now. One thing that a lot of authors, in my experience, overlook is celebrating one's successes. When you have a book release, go out to dinner, have a really good drink, relax a little bit, build in time to celebrate your successes. Otherwise, it feels like a constant grind that you're just not gonna get. You're just gonna keep going and keep going and keep going. And if you don't give yourself that time to rest, you're just gonna burn out, and that's not gonna help anybody, especially not you.
Thinking of burnout, I'm thinking for someone starting out, or you have one you may not know what you're comfortable with yet. You have all these different, I don't know, thinking tools, that's not the right word, you know, methods, avenues to explore, from TikTok videos, good God, to you know, maybe traditional signings or readings. And this is the fourth, I guess, panel in the series that we've had now. And one of the things I've heard a lot is, you know, first time you try to explore these things that may not be right, 'cause you're not sure if they're right. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so there's the first, you know, or not the first time, but maybe a young author trying the signing for the first time, or reading for the first time, just trying to, and then I think maybe a universal disappointment that, you know, that you got to this stage and for somehow no one knows who you are yet, type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to hear, I guess, how you guys made that transition, maybe from when you didn't have a community yet, or maybe it was much smaller. You know, how did you keep that persistence and how did you try out things to find out what you liked or what fit you, I guess?
Well, prepare to remain humble.
I was gonna say, if anyone shows up at a signing, you're like, yes.
I think it's 5 people.
Right?
This
That's
is a
what I mean.
good day,
That's you're in the big leagues.
Right,
man.
I mean, let's face it, if you go, suppose you get hooked up with your local bookstore and they arrange a signing for you, well, maybe your wife will turn up and a couple of your pals, right? And then, but there's just not as many readers as there used to be. And so people with just casual interest in reading may not swing by. And you just gotta remember that, unfortunately, that's how a lot of signings go until you're huge. I remember the first time I was at a convention, and I think it was one of the World Fantasy Cons or Worldcon, and I'm like, man, what is that long line over there? Someone says, Neil Gaiman's at the end of that. I'm like, oh!
I was in that line.
Yeah. I had a signing once at it was a Gencon, and I sat there for an hour and no one showed up. And then Ed Greenwood came after me, and the first guy for Ed Greenwood had a book for me to sign to, and that was when I discovered I hadn't had a pen that whole time. Yeah, I think that's the thing. You get the idea that it's going to be like Neil Gaiman, and then it's like, actually, you know, the fact that if anybody shows up, if anybody like loved your work enough that they want to come, take some time out to come find you and meet you, like that's amazing. Right, that's so rewarding, right? No, you're not Neil Gaiman, but somebody wanted to come and tell you that they liked your book, or someone, you know, maybe passing by saw it and was engaged enough to come, and that still counts for a lot. And I think that's stay humble.
My favorite was at Worldcon when they put the line for Brandon Sanderson right in front of all the other authors waiting for somebody to come. It's like.
See, okay, but I kind of love that because then you have people and you can just talk to them.
Right, because they got nowhere to go.
And if they have to wait too long, they start to feel guilty and then they buy your book.
Yes, weaponize guilt to sell books. I did that.
Don't guilt them directly because that's annoying, but be charming. And then they'll be like, oh, she's been entertaining me for so long. I guess I'll
I think maybe some of our comfortable say we'll get some data and go, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable doing the signing or reading yet. I'm going to try it. I'm told that maybe I shouldn't expect much. Okay, I don't get much. All right, am I supposed to do this again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go through the motions.
Yep, you keep doing it.
You keep
Although
better.
I will say that everything that we talked about here so far, if you do all of it, and you do all of it perfectly, you're still not going to make or break the book.
That's true.
I mean, you're probably adding, I don't know, another 10, 15, 25% to your sales.
Like Erin said, moving the needle a little bit.
A little bit, like, so it's not, you don't need to beat yourself up over it. You know, the books are going to sell mostly organically as it is.
Yeah.
You know, like you can throw all that effort into it and get a little bit more, but it's not going to be, if you don't do it, the thing's going to crash and burn.
I think a really good example of that too is like, how well are you on social media? Because there are people who are really good at social media, and some of them I've talked to are like, it doesn't actually seem to affect my
No,
sales.
that's-
People love my tweets.
Yep.
The book's a different thing.
I have some 55,000 followers on Twitter, and I'm never calling it X. It's fucking Twitter. Dumb fuck.
Legally, yeah, it is.
But it's and I've got like I said, about 55,000 people or followers. I've been building that for 10 years now. But even then, you know, half of those followers don't even know I'm an author. You know, because like none of us self-publish. None of us self-promote enough. None of us talk about what we do enough. And so most of the people that follow me on Twitter are following me for my political tweets. A lot of them aren't readers. A lot of them aren't sci-fi fans. You know, they're just there to see me tear strips off of Trump.
Which is very entertaining.
But so that doesn't necessarily translate to a huge number of new sales. But what it does translate to is publishers and looking at that and going, oh, he's got a big social media following, so we're going to give him a larger advance, which is fine with me.
I want to make sure I forgot to mention this. We want to get your guys' feedback too. We have time for that. So if you have any questions, now is a great time. If not, you know, you should be raising your hand. So do you guys have any questions yet? No? Okay, so just shout them out or start, you know, oh, there we go.
I'll ask one.
Yeah, yes.
So when you first started writing and you were first, you know, you've talked a lot about, like, a little bit about social media and making connections. Obviously a convention like this is a great place to make conventions.
Definitely.
Do you talk to your friends and tell them, I mean, without being like super cheap, your first release, do you tell them to buy your book? Do you tell other people that you know or your friends or coworkers to do that? That's all like legit and not off-bound. Like I said, just trying to find that boundary, right?
Hey, this is my debut, and it's really important for, you know. So,
Okay.
And the pre-orders are love.
Okay.
You know, and you know, buy it for a gift. Give it to somebody else if that's not your kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
The line is probably somewhere like if you're doing that sort of like MLM thing of like messaging them constantly, like,
Sure.
have you bought my book? Have you bought 5 for your friends?
Uh-huh.
That's probably too
And you got
far.
5 people.
But
you got
I mean,
5 people to buy 5 copies.
but presumably like they care about you and they care about this thing that's important to you, and so yeah, my experience has always been like, you know, they want to know where to get it. So I think absolutely tell them.
And if you ran a Kickstarter, for instance, that's a totally reasonable reason to message people who contributed to your Kickstarter, because obviously they care about your career or they were interested in something you wrote.
Yeah, very good.
So maybe they're going to be interested in this other thing that you wrote, especially if it's connected.
Nice.
Thank you guys for the answer. I appreciate it.
And
I have a fun story if there are no other questions.
I had one, but go ahead with fun stories are good. So talk
All
about
right.
it.
He's got a question.
I have a quick
Oh,
question.
okay.
Yeah.
You're talking about Kickstarters. So, say for example, I also write for games. So if I write for games, but I'm also writing stories, does that work the same way?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends on in what context you're writing for games.
Would it have to be like if my story took place in the setting?
It certainly helps the crossover.
It certainly does. Like when you're writing for a game setting, especially if it's like an established IP that you don't own. Like Erin and I have both written for Forgotten Realms, for instance. That has a built-in fan base, and so when people see a Forgotten Realms novel coming out, they're like, "Yes, wonderful! I'm going to buy that Forgotten Realms novel."
Then
They're-
complain about it.
Right. And I'm going to go on Candlekeep and I'm going to complain about it. But the thing is, as Erin mentioned at our licensed panel just 20 minutes ago, your name is kind of secondary to the Forgotten Realms title itself. People are there mostly for the setting, maybe a little bit for you as well. But as Richard Byers mentioned on the panel, see, I'm just reiterating our panel from last time. They're not necessarily going to follow you to some other world that you wrote in. So yes, if you're writing in games and you're writing stories in the same setting, there is a good deal of overlap there. People who play in that setting will probably want to read in that setting, or at least you're a little open to it. If you write in a game setting and you write something totally different, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of overlap. You'll have some super fans, sure.
Yeah, I wrote for the Paizo Pathfinder one. I had 4 novels with them, and I'm not sure that there was much crossover. It seemed like the people who were into Pathfinder read Pathfinder novels, and maybe they paid attention to the author a little bit.
Yeah.
But not very many of them came over to check out my independent work. And I'm not sure my independent work readers go over and say, oh, well, that's a Pathfinder novel, I don't play Pathfinder. Or, it's
Yeah,
just-
in fact, my agent has actively discouraged me from looking into writing for IP. He's like, look, if you want to write for Star Wars just because it's a vanity thing, it's just something you always wanted to do, that's great. But like, you can hit list as a New York Times bestseller writing a Star Wars book and no one will jump over because they read Star Wars. They don't read Patrick Tomlinson.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, we have quite a few friends that have written for Star Wars, Star Trek, all that stuff. And they make good money, but they also don't. They get paid once. They just get they get the fee, and because they don't own the IP, they don't usually get any sort of royalties or residuals out of it. So some agents are actively like against that because you're spending all that time, but you're not building
your career.
You're not building your career, really. You're building someone else's IP.
No, I do think you're honing your craft.
Yes.
Sure, it's
Yeah.
I always, yeah.
License writing is I've done very little of it. I wrote some short stories for BattleTech back in the day, and so you have a rule book that you have to follow, and it is it fits something into a larger world. It's a different kind of writing, and it's kind of fun, and especially if it's a property that you enjoy.
I think too, there's a lot of variability in maybe I've gone sort of off topic, but I think this is very interesting. There's a lot of variability too in how much the licensors like follow this path and how much they're like, put your stamp on this part of the world.
Right.
So I feel like Forgotten Realms generally is more put your stamp on this world, so that a book, the way I write a Forgotten Realms book is not the way Erik writes a Forgotten Realms book, is not the way Bob Salvatore writes a Forgotten Realms book, but there might be a little vibe overlap, right? So, but there is a little more of, I like this author in this setting, in that space, than there is in other properties. But it is the case still, even though, I think I carved out a niche in that setting and I did pull a lot of my readers over. It is not a huge number, because a lot of them, right, it's that logo, I want that setting, I want that.
And the other thing about tie-in writing is these schedules are usually, the turnaround is insane. Like here's we need this 100,000 word, here's novel done. Here's a rough outline of where we want you to go with it, and we need it back in 6 weeks.
But to tie it back to new releases, obviously, that's
Well,
I mean, there's going to be a schedule for the new release, and the property is going to be managing that, which would be quite different. So, yeah, funny story.
I wanted to say briefly, I mentioned a thing called superfans. Writing anything, whether it's a tie-in, license, small press, whatever, can attract a superfan. Superfans are very important to your career.
I love how you sound like David Attenborough. What's the guy? David Attenborough, is that his name? That's like nature guy. Like, you gotta attract a superfan. sorry, go ahead.
There's a box with a stick and a roll.
Life cycle of a superfan. No, this will be a person who just reads something and it really speaks to them, and they read more things that you wrote, and those things speak to them, and then they will start just consuming everything that you wrote, and
telling other people,
which is very important. And these people are often the nicest people ever. Sometimes they're crazy stalkers, but usually they're nice. And that could be a very good thing, to have people who will evangelize your work, right? Because word of mouth is 100% the best form of promotion and marketing yet there is.
I hear from several things coming out of this, but part of it is, there's a long game. It's not even just one book release, I guess. Sorry, it seems like if you're going to make a career out of this, there's going to be multiple Well,
some of the best advice I got was from a friend of mine who's several years further into this than I am, and he had just said every new release is your debut, and you have to look at it that way.
Yeah, that.
Right. Awesome. Are there other questions?
I actually have one more question.
Yeah, fire away.
And I've been to a couple other, not here, but I've been to other seminars on this sort of thing, and I'd like to get your guys' ideas on pros and cons for self-publishing.
I haven't self-published. I know quite a few people who have. There is a huge, I'd call it a survivorship bias in self-publishing, because you'll see these people who like oh shoot, what was it? Oh, Wool. You know, that came out that was self-published initially, and you'll see these people do these just huge, insane numbers, and think, oh wow, like self-publishing is the way to go. I'm not being held back by a publisher. I can do my own marketing, and nobody's going to tell me how to write. What you don't see is the 99.9999% that sell 5 copies. You know, and it's now you're doing 3 jobs, well, at least at least 3 jobs. You're being a full-time author, but now you're doing all your own promo. You're either doing your own editing or you're sending it out to someone else to do it. And you have to come up with or buy your own cover art. You have to do your own.
You have to learn a layout program.
Layout programs, you know, your
You
own
have to deal with
conversions.
Amazon or wherever you're distributing it through.
It's
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. You know, is it possible to be successful at it? Sure. And some people prefer that amount of control over their own career. I personally don't want that. I just want to write the damn book and throw it at somebody and say, do the rest of the stuff, please. You know, because I want to be an author, not a full-time, all around publisher too.
These days I'm publishing through small presses. I've never actually self-publishing. To me, self-publishing seems a bit like hiking 10 miles up a mountain with a lightning rod in your hand to get hit by lightning at the top of the mountain. And you're gonna fall off the mountain regardless. It's just a matter of whether you got hit by lightning or not before you fell, which is really bleak. But what I'm saying is it's a lot of work and it is not guaranteed success. But then again, there is no guarantee of success in publishing.
No.
Even if you go through a big publisher, even if you were independently wealthy, you're still not guaranteed success. So I'm not gonna say don't do it. I'm gonna say go into it with your eyes open.
And we personally know some people who are doing quite well with
Yeah.
self-publishing.
Oh, yeah.
So Sean, Lydia, what's Lydia's last name?
Sure.
Lydia Sherrill. She does some writing for Bain, but she's actually doing so well independently. She's continuing to do some stuff on the side with her own line. I mean, she's found the cover art. She does all of her own promotions, and she's just making money hand over fist. So it's not an impossible thing, but you got to have a little bit of marketing savvy and a little bit of chutzpah, right?
Yeah, it's a different skill set. It's
Yeah.
a totally different skill set. And you might also have that skill set.
If you've got them, or you're really close with someone who does, your brother or your wife or your husband or whatever, then make a team and do it.
Yeah.
It's a different skill set, I think, at some levels, because like, even if you're an author and a writer, you don't want to be doing these other things. Certainly, the promotional aspect has been pushed back on the authors a lot. So
Quite a bit, yeah.
So there's still.
But as we said, you're responsible for a lot of promotion, but fundamentally that promotion only moves the needle a little bit, right? What they're doing, what a publisher does for you fundamentally in a lot of ways is distribution, right?
Yes.
Having the book places people can buy it is like the biggest thing. And that's a thing that if you are self-publishing, you're gonna have to figure out.
I will say that if you look at most of the very, very most successful self-publishers, people like Hugh Howey and Andy Weir with The Martian, they all got to that level of success self-publishing and then took book deals with the publisher.
And let me add one more thing, and that's that all of the ones that I've seen that sell really well have really excellent covers. I see so many self-publishing that's like, well, I don't really have a budget, so I'm just gonna get my cousin's kid to draw one or something. It's like, no, save up the money. If you're gonna go into it, save up the money and get a really awesome cover, because that's gonna really stand out.
And this is actually another thing. So in my former life, I was an editor, and one thing that I found, like 90% of the time, is that authors don't know anything about what is a good book cover. They want, you know, people would be like, oh, you need to make sure that you show all these details of the hero and I can see all of his gear, and I'm like, this is not gonna sell a book. This is not gonna be engaging and sell a book. This is gonna be busy and weird, and like, be honest with yourself, because that is a skill set that art directors have built to know what makes a good cover, what makes an eye-catching cover, and be able to put it out there. So getting someone, who knows what they're doing to help you out with that is, I mean, it's one of those things I think a lot of people are like, well, I know I like books, and I can pick a book I like, so I can make a cover. It's like, it's harder than that.
But taking it back to new releases, and I think I'll be right with you. I think there's self-publishing, and there's like small press, and there's like this whole continuum there. And I think the lower you're down in that ladder, you start to have a little less control over what the new release is. I think maybe more. It's different anyway. So I've seen a lot. I do a lot of Goodreads and moderating, trying to get books in the right places and stuff. And there's a lot of times books are to be shown before the small press wants it to be out there. That happens all the time. I'm helping some small presses trying to figure out, if my book's being published before or shown to people, and is because they started to put it somewhere, and then there's these algorithms that'll snag it and start sharing it broadly before that they even know. So I think there's a trying to control when your book's released and shown to the public and how you want to do it. It's going to be different. You don't have the community either, so in that case, maybe you do want it out there, but it's something to plan. Sean, you have a question?
Yeah. Given we have 5 authors on the panel, is there anything you wish publishers would do more to support a new book release? And is there anything readers can do more to support a new book release?
Great question.
I want to pick Erik first.
Spend more. I mean, well, if you want to look at a very good, very supportive work from a publisher to support a new release, look at what Sean's doing. He's been, pimping Howard's books all weekend, and he's now filming our panel, and that's great. Like, publishers should be doing kind of stuff like that, and because it's good for them, it's good for the writer, it's good for everyone's confidence. It's excellent. I applaud you, sir.
I'm going to be quoting you on that.
Good. I also applaud Bain for letting you / commanding you to do this. It was a good idea.
Yeah, on the publisher side of things, I mean, there needs to be a rebalance, because you're putting, thank you, because you're throwing so much of the money towards books you already know are going to be successful. It's like, the next Scalzi, I love John Scalzi, but his next book doesn't need 90% of Tor's marketing budget. It's going to sell itself, like there needs to be a redress where, the debuts and the standalones get more of that pie again, which is more like it was 15, 20 years ago before I got into it, and that was working. That's how you create the new, the next Game of Thrones, because series don't, the next big thing doesn't just appear overnight. It took 10 years for Song of Ice and Fire to really catch on. I mean, it was 4 or 5 books into the series before it became Game of Thrones. And we're seeing publishers pull back from that and go for the sure thing, or what they think is going to be the sure thing.
Right.
And the same thing that's happening in Hollywood. Well, now that sure thing is losing hundreds or $200 million on these releases. The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Black Adam. Okay, I'm really picking on DC. But my point remains, and it's like eventually people get burned out on that stuff because you haven't found the next big thing.
Yeah.
Then Barbie comes along with a $100 million budget and makes $1 billion.
Everybody's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, so I'm sort of racking my brain as to like things that I mean, I think what both of what Erik and Patrick said were really good points. The times I have been sort of seen the most from publisher support were when I was paired with a bigger author. And I feel like when they can do that, when they can kind of say, you like this author, you might also like this one, to me that shows their understanding of their list, and it does show they're looking for the next thing. I don't know what happens if you're the big author is like, no. I was fortunate to get time with Bob Salvatore, who was delightful. But that kind of thing where you find the readers and you sort of like push the author towards the readers, I think that's a thing, and any way of doing that, rather, right? Like being savvier with book talk, being savvier with BookTube, that kind of thing. For readers, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just champion the books and the authors that you like. You know, being willing to get excited about stuff. Like Erik was talking about super fans, and definitely I know the people who have, you know, gotten excited about Brimstone Angels and gotten excited about Empire of Exiles and gone out and told people, hey, there's this book coming out by this author I really love. I told you about her before. Check this excerpt out. Like being that person. But like, what was it? This was not a debut. It's not a release thing, but the Bigglest Dicklest thing, right?
Incredible.
Right.
Yeah, the
like,
book had already been out for 3 years.
Right, and it's just that this person was someone that people liked and trusted with like their opinion, and they got out and said, this book is amazing and you should go read it, and just don't ask any questions, just go do it, and people did.
Tied back to new releases, like there's the official release, but then maybe the little spark
the
might
tail
be
exists.
3 years later we get someone else done.
Especially
That
with
book
stuff
was-
like Book Talk, right?
That
Yeah.
book was How to Lose the Time War, by the way. And it's a novella, actually. I mean, I listened to the audio a few months ago, and it was only like 4 hours long. So it's a short, very easy read, but it's very good. And it did okay to begin with. You know, it's got some award recognition, but then this Biggest Dicklest thing happened about 4 months ago, and it made the New York Times bestseller list, which it hadn't done upon its release.
Which I think speaks so strongly to the power of the readership, right? The things that we choose to do as readers are really, really what impacts this whole business.
Right. So I'm getting a lot of great support from Bain, and I suppose what I need to do then is say, what would I want more from readers? And it's amazing how much just a little helped on Amazon could do. So if someone reads my book and likes it, to go on there, they don't even have to write a long review. It's not like they have to write 8 paragraphs or something, even just a sentence. Because once you get to 50 sales or 100 sales, then it helps the metric, and Amazon automatically promotes you. It's just like this automatic thing that it does, and it appears on more screens, and then it's like an organic.
That is one thing. Amazon not being a publisher, but like part of that ecosystem, and I cannot believe they don't do it. But if someone, like, they track all the information. If someone has bought all the books of a series or all the books an author has, why doesn't it just send an email saying your favorite author or your favorite series has next book comes out now? Do you want to pre-order? And they don't do it. It's insane to me. It'd be 5 lines of code.
All right, we got to wrap up. So I want to say, first I want to thank all the panelists. We'll give a quick round of applause.
You guys are amazing.
I want to remind people we have this first ever limited edition USB drive. You heard about it, but it took forever to get Gencon to give us permission to sell anything. It's not quite an anthology per se, but it's getting close to something like that. So we have 30 authors who provided books for this, and they'll get.
I'm in there.
Yeah,
So check
Howard,
it out.
Howard's book is in
My
there.
new book is in there.
And I think there's 30 of the roughly 65 authors we have here have some form of representation in here. So $30 worth over 120. We only made a little bit of amount because we didn't know how it was going to go. We still have a bunch left. And give that a shot. I'd recommend it. And we already thanked the panelists. I think we're good. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I want to get a quick